the great poet, Harlem Renaissance poet, Harlem Renaissance era poet, who in response to the Red Summer penned the poem that I had read.
Joe, since you already got the mic, I'm going to have a question from you, but I want our dear lady up front here to have a question. Go ahead and fire your question up, and we're going to ask you to bring the mic up here as soon as Mr. Cable finishes.
My question pertains to the 1970 primary and runoff election in Alabama. As you know, this is one of the watershed elections in the state history. I don't think we've had the turnout since to reach the number that it did. Now, to qualify this, the 65 Voting Rights Act, I've heard numbers that 500,000 blacks are added to the voting roll. I've also seen numbers where there are 500,000 white voters added to the voting roll. So we have this major election between George Wallace and Albert Brewer, and it is bitter. Have any of the panelists looked at particularly at this election and went in depth and would like to comment on that watershed election?
I can speak a little bit about just 1970.
1970 runoff, primary and runoff.
Well, I can speak from one aspect of that. 1970 is the year that Joel Reed is appointed chairman of the ADC. Prior to Joel Reed, there were two chairmen, Arthur Shores or Zeb Billingsley. So when Joel Reed becomes chairman, understand the multifaceted roles he played in African American politics in Alabama. He was at the same time, he was the chair of the ADC, I believe executive secretary of the AEA.
Well, he was the old Alabama State Teachers.
The ASTA.
ASTA. When they merged, he became associate executive secretary of AEA.
So using that position of influence, I would argue that by him being elected chairman in 1970, he was able to marshal, I think, resources and people throughout the state. And again, he used policies that had not been used in ADC's history for the previous 10 years. So I don't know about the actual numbers, but I do know politically, with him assuming the role of chairman in 1970, that maybe that played a role in such a large turnout.
No.
So what are you saying? He was for Wallace and not Brewer?
No. The primary, the makeup of votes between the primary and the runoff are critical. And the first time you used the word block.
Can you talk a little louder, Mr. Cable? Can you talk a little louder?
The black block vote, where Wallace comes from $250,000 down in the primary and wins the election overwhelmingly in the runoff by using the block vote. And yes, ADC is prominent. So the backlash from those black voters. But to turn out the number of white voters in the runoff versus the primary, these are watershed moments in Alabama voting history, because he makes up a difference of almost 300,000 votes between the primary and the runoff. And for the first time, we have new terminology being used: block, black block vote. And yes, Dr. Reed, ADC, National NPA, up in Huntsville.
The National Democratic Party.
Democratic pictures are being placed, circulated throughout the state. And the racial block voting is the issue that motivates the majority of white voters who had not been participating in the system since the 1901 Constitution. Now they're returning back to the.
That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted you to bring out, Mr. Cable. That Wallace. It was. You asked. Why was it? It wasn't difficult for him to come from behind by more than 250,000 votes, because what you did. Just that. You played on the fact that Albert Brewer was getting the African American, the black vote, and you're right. Those whites who had not been voted turned out in overwhelmingly voted for George Wallace, and I believe that was the first time that the Constitution was changed to allow the governor to succeed himself too.
And there had never been that much a turnout for an election in Alabama, not before and not since. This is a historical election. It's amazing.
Question up front here.
I want to fast forward to today. Rolundus Rice, you said something that I think is very, very important when we are talking about students and we're dealing with students, because after all, we're here on Alabama State University's campus where students actually played a huge role in the struggle for voting rights. Today, we still have some of those same struggles. 2014 is coming, as well as 2016. How do we take all of this information, all of these diagrams, all of the energies, and transform it to put to use for 2014, get our students motivated, have these lessons for them to learn. Doc and I, and for those of you that don't know, Dr. Robinson is my other half. I'm his better half. but we have this conversation all the time. When I first stepped foot onto Alabama State University's campus, George Andrews, a 1951 graduate, recruited all of us from New York and sent us down here. We had the Hardys, we had the Underwoods, we had others who served as surrogates, who guided us, who gave us advice. Dr. Rob and I tried to do the same thing. So how do we take all of this good information today to get our students organized? Because that's something that I see that the students here to some degree lack. I was a part of SGA. We were much more organized. What do we do today with this information?
I think, and I learned this tactic when I was teaching at the past year or so. I learned how to make issues very relevant to my students.
Correct.
For example, my students may not have been as concerned with Medicaid and Social Security, but they are concerned about their education. They're concerned about the Pell Grant. So if I tell my students, well, the Republican Party is working to defund the Pell Grant, oh, that matters to them. And I say, well, you know, if your education is in jeopardy, then your future may be in jeopardy. And again, the more you learn, the more you earn, is what I tell my students continuously. So I found it effective to, you know, make issues very relevant to them. They may not always be concerned with the 30,000-foot view of the political process, but maybe a 5,000-foot view to where it impacts them directly. And I think the issues that, again, that I referred to a few moments ago with the government shutdown, people are, and students are understanding that the presidential election is just not the only election that matters. They are now seeing that these congressional elections are just as important. And Tip O'Neill, former Speaker of the House during the Reagan era, said it best that all politics is local. So your local political environment impacts you far much more than the presidential environment, because those people in the House of Representatives, your respective state legislators, they direct finances, education, the issues that impact you every single day. So I think once our students understand that, and not just looking at the general election as being the key election every 4 years, I think they will begin to understand how important every election is and exercise their right to vote.
We'll have one more question. Okay, go ahead. Go both of you. Then we'll have one.
I think we're in a unique position. I say we're, the folks associated with the National Center for the Study of Civil Rights and African American Culture, because that's part of our mandate. The programs that we have, this program included, is not just to provide information, but it's also to help our students couch today's political environment in a historic context. And so we're trying to arm our students with a better understanding of the political environment that they exist in. And so they're informed by the political battles of the past. and they understand how those battles played out and who in fact were involved in fighting those battles. In addition to that, you know, I see some of my my students here, and in the classroom, we also have the opportunity to try to relate today's political environment. I think we did that last night in class. I tried to show them the comparison between what's happening today in the political environment and some of those antecedents, those early political battles, and try to point out how similar they are. And so hopefully that again arms our students with some historical context to understand their political world more intimately. And lastly, I think I'm privileged to work in an environment. I work in the library, and we have a number of exhibits that allow us to tell this story of the civil rights movement, political empowerment, and how these battles were fought in a really tangible and interactive way, so that students could see the pictures of and read the stories about and interact with electronic devices that sort of illustrate, you know, this historic context. So I think that we are attempting to address that very issue in a number of different ways.
If we are in Germany, how you doing this, sister? You haven't changed, actually. If we are in Germany, how would we communicate with the students? Would we speak to them in Russian? This is a 21st century population, and as was evidenced in the room, at the end of a particular presentation, they had to sign their role in that presentation, they were gone. We have to start endeavoring to create the wherewithal in our institutions, our colleges, our high schools, elementary schools, middle schools, community centers, the avenues to communicate with our young people in a way they understand. I'm glad to hear Brother Howie talk about the technology. This is a technological generation. This is a generation where this is the first generation I've experienced that will not bring pen or pad to class. They don't need to because they have electronic devices. We have to flood them with the importance of the political process and connect the political process to the all-important financial and economic process. Because if they remain disconnected, our young people will remain disinterested. So that connection has to be made.
We will have one more quick burning question. If not, give our panelists a hand. Oh, you can do better than that. I tell you, I have learned some things here today. Appreciate you so much. At this time, we're going to ask that Dr. Janice Franklin, who is Dean of Librarian, and then she is the Director of the National Center for Civil Rights and African American Culture at Alabama State University. Dean Franklin, the floor is yours to close us out.
Thank you, Dr. Finley, and I'm just going to do that too. I want to thank, first of all of you, and many of you stayed all day long, and that was exceptional, and I want to say how much we appreciate that in the National Center. Let me also thank our students. Those who are students, would you raise your hand? I want you to know how much we appreciate your being here and being a part of this presentation. Can you imagine how many hours you would have to spend to look up all this information and learn all of this? And to be here and just witness it and just sit there and learn, that's a wonderful experience, and it's because of these outstanding platform guests that are here before you. I want to thank all of them, and let's begin by thanking our guest from Tuskegee, Dr. Roberson. Thank you so much for being here. And the beauty of his presentation was that he started with that exceptional poem as well. One of our poets that we don't hear that much about anymore. And it was a mixture of African American culture with a discussion of civil rights, which is part of what we do in the National Center. So thank you so much for being with us today. It was an outstanding presentation. And of course, our moderator, who did an exceptional job as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Finley. And of course, last but not least, I want to thank Dr. Autrey, who is our program chair. And when I say that she makes sure that we make every effort possible to have an outstanding program, and I want to thank her so very much for this work that she does with us. Dr. Robinson, an excellent presentation, and also Mr. Rice. Dr. Robinson handles so many, let's just stop and just give them all a big applause again. Thank you. We've achieved our objectives today with this program. We wanted to kick off the 50th anniversary of the Selma and Montgomery March celebrations. So I think we are way ahead now, and I do appreciate the hard work of this team, this outstanding group that you listened to today. Are there any other questions, anything else that we need to handle before we leave? If not, let me say thank you so very much. Let me say before we leave, I'd like to recognize the library staff who is here as well. There are members of the library staff who handle a lot, because I can still remember going into Cutie Adams' home and actually pulling these boxes and materials out of what he called the doghouse, where he actually had a lot of these political meetings. So to have seen that in operation and now to hear these presentations, may I thank you all again.
Dean Franklin, I guess we are dismissed now? All right.